Friends, hello. In this edition of Infravisioning, we take a hard and close look at the national logistics policy. Now, when you think of logistics, the point that comes to mind normally for all of us is roads, rail, warehousing, ports, airports, shipping, trucks. These are the images that come to mind when you think of logistics. But logistics is actually a far, far more complex web of activities. Consider the following: there are 20 government agencies, 37 export promotion councils, 500 certifications, 200 shipping agencies, 36 logistics services, 129 inland container depots, and 168 container freight stations. Then there are a web of permissions and testing centers. So it's actually a complex web of activities, both hard and soft, that define the world of logistics. And it is this world that the government is seeking to make a very, very major intervention in recognizing its importance in the cost competitiveness for the Indian economy. So, what is the National Logistics Plan? It's a bold plan. It seeks to reduce the cost of logistics in India's overall economic structure from an existing 13% of GDP to about 8% of GDP. Now, that's a 5% drop. At first, a 5% may not look too big to you, but when you see it is 5% of GDP, then consider what the GDP is and what 5% means. At current prices, GDP is around 240 lakh crores or rupees 240 trillion. Now, on rupees 240 lakh crores, 5% is about 12 lakh crores. This is the amount of cost saving that is envisaged in the years ahead, possibly 5 to 7 years. Now, that is at current prices, and looking ahead at 5 to 7 years, this 12 lakh crore saving of cost for the Indian economy could well balloon to 20 lakh crores. Now, 20 lakh crores is almost a little short of the 22 lakh crores, which is the annual target for the National Infrastructure Plan. The entire amount that the country plans to spend on infrastructure is 22 lakh crores. And in the years ahead, a 5% saving in cost competitiveness of logistics, by cost competitiveness of logistics, is expected to save that amount for the economy. Now, that is a humongous target which the government has unleashed, and it requires credit for understanding this age-old problem where Indian manufacturing industry, service industry, exporters, importers have all been complaining that one of their prime reasons for battling against competitiveness vis-a-vis the rest of the world is the logistics cost. So, how does it plan? What are the broad elements of the logistics plan? There are 5 key pillars. The first is it expects rail to take up a far higher share of trunk movements of goods, parcels, and commodities. It seeks to increase the share of rail from 40%, from the current 28% to 40%. It envisages setting up a web of multimodal logistics parks. Now, what is a multimodal logistics park? A multimodal logistic park is where, with minimum difficulty, seamlessly goods are able to be transported from one mode of transportation to other. Let's say from truck to rail, or from an inland waterway port where a truck unloads to a boat. These are called multimodal logistics parks, and is very, very important to achieve seamlessness and cost productivity in logistics. The one at Nagpur is being developed as a role model for the same. The policy seeks to implement plans for inland waterways and coastal shipping. This government earlier on had given significant emphasis to inland waterways and to coastal shipping. We have not seen too much action yet, but plans are afoot, and the Inland Waterways Authority and other agencies are working round the clock to somehow get coastal shipping and inland waterways to be a major contributor to transportation in our country. So that was pillar number 3. The policy also targets 15 key industries who move bulk commodities like iron ore, steel, cement, coal, etc. So targeted focus on 15 key commodities that are one of the major users of the entire logistics chain. And finally, no surprises, this government, with its massive focus on digitalization, also plans to use digital technologies for integration, monitoring, and resolution of logistics issues. All this sounds good. What are the special challenges? Well, for the railways, it is really to match the door to door service that the road sector provides. You load a truck at a factory, it delivers at the next go down seamlessly. So, railways have to move on door to door. It should proceed aggressively with its MOU with the Indian Postal Services for parcel delivery service. So, a combination between railways and Indian posts is going to be a formidable challenge in terms of home delivery and institutional delivery of packets, parcels. And finally, railways need to aggressively move on what is called RORO, roll on, roll off, which means a truck actually is loaded onto a railway wagon and then transported across long distances in this country and rolls off again to effect a door-to-door delivery. That's RORO. So these are the big challenges before the railways. In terms of air shipments, India seriously requires a hinterland around the airports, which are called aerotropolises, backed with very strong cold chain logistics, because many of the commodities exported by air are perishables. Fruit, flowers, vegetables, these are areas where India needs to make an impact. So aerotropolises with a large focus on cold chaining needs to be set up around airports, not just the major airports, but even some of the smaller airports from where the goods originate. What are the challenges before ports? The biggest challenge before the ports, and one has to acknowledge that efficiency of ports has increased significantly, and turnaround time of ships, etc., are far better than they were earlier. But yet, the biggest issue with ports today are two. One, the port transporter interface. Truckers, railways complain that it takes far longer to unload or load their containers or their goods from the time it is unloaded from a ship or ready for loading to a ship. So the transporter port interface requires significant attention, as does customs clearance. Any dipstick on exporters and imports, and one of the first things you will hear is that they still consider Indian customs as a severe impediment to seamless logistics. These are the two challenges before ports. And for cold chain, we need not just cold chains at aerotropolises, but from farm to fork. We need a chain of cold chains at the agricultural mandis, the centers, reefer trucks that carry refrigerated containers that will move to aerotropolises, which will then ship them to international markets. So an entire cold chain network needs to be set up, and these are the challenges of the logistics policy. The next challenge is really what I spoke about a little earlier, inland waterways and coastal shipping. The government in Parliament has declared 105 inland river routes as NWs, national waterways. There are 105 of them. Few of them have achieved a degree of success, but there are miles to go in terms of creating riverine ports, which are multimodal, in terms of dredging, in terms of night navigation, in terms of channel creation, and in terms of telling the transporter of goods that there is a viable, cost-effective communication channel available for you, which is not just cheaper, but is environmentally so much more friendlier. So major focus required on inland waterways. And finally, of course, the digital challenge. There are so many forms, permissions, agencies, and regulatory clearances that the integration of all of them on an e-platform is crying out for attention, which the government has acknowledged. It is part of the National Logistics Plan. So let's spend a little time on the digital platform. A digital platform has been created as part of the National Logistics Policy called ULIP, the Unified Logistics Interface Platform. Now, the ULIP is going to build on the NICDC Logistics Data Services. Now, this is NLDS in abbreviation, and it's a joint venture between the Government of India, represented by the National Industrial Corridor Development Corporation, and NICDIT, which is the NIC Implementation Trust. And all this is a 50-50 joint venture between the IT major NEC Corporation of Japan and the Indian logistics system. So we have an interesting platform that was already under development. NLDS, the National Logistics Data Services, was formed with the objective of effectively leveraging ICT across the Indian logistics sector to bring about efficiencies. Now, NLDS has been leveraged and upscaled to develop ULIP. Remember, ULIP is the Unified Logistics Interface Platform, which the government now envisages will link everything to do with the logistics sectors across 3 layers. So NLDS will have the integration layer, it will have the governance layer, and it will have the presentation layer. Each of these layers have their own functions, and overseeing all of this will be an implementation group called the Services Improvement Group, SIG. It's almost like the national planning group that oversees the Gati Shakti platform. And the SIG is basically going to do deep dives on the NLDS or the ULIP, which is the Unified Logistics Platform, to integrate it, to look at various simplifying governance issues, and in the third layer, to constantly look at the suggestions and grievances of real players on the field to remove them. So it is a very, very major digital and e-intervention across many digital dashboards that are being integrated. And how will all this be monitored? For example, the question that everybody is asking is, how do we really know that the cost of logistics is 13% in the Indian economy and that it is going to gradually come down to 8%? Well, the logistics division of the Ministry of Commerce and Industry does undertake an annual logistics ease across different states survey. The acronym is LEADS, LEADAS, Logistics Ease Across Different States, which is going to continuously survey improvements and the data to actually monitor the target of reduction from 13 to 8%. In the LEADS, it's an annual survey and is likely to be made biannual. LEADS 2021 improved in many ways for further professionalizing the work that is being done, and particularly in terms of the dipstick, in terms of percentage to GDP. Simultaneously, the Bureau of Industrial Standards has also released a manual on standardization of warehouses in this country, so that they are of uniform quality, of uniform service delivery, and slowly measure up to world standards. So friends, here is the complete picture on the national logistics policy. As you can imagine, it is probably one of the biggest interventions that seek to reduce inefficiencies in our transportation web and significantly increase the cost competitiveness of the Indian industry and the Indian economy. Thank you.